So we're here in Guelph, Ontario with Anne Gordon, who is a well-known Canadian travel writer. Who do you write for, Anne?
I've had, my articles have been published in all of the major newspapers in Canada and by the Los Angeles Times, Boston Globe and a lot of North American newspapers and in magazines.
So you do this pretty well as a living?
Yes.
And you're a member of TMAC?
I was a member of TMAC. I'm now thinking of joining NACHA, which is the North American Travel Journalists Association.
And what is the advantage of an organisation like that?
I think it's a bigger organisation, and they do have their own magazine where they can they publish the writers, members' articles in there as well. It's a much bigger organisation.
So for a person who's not a travel writer, what would the advantage of belonging to NACHA or TMAC be?
If you're not a travel writer, then you cannot belong to them, unless you're one of the media. If you're not media, if you're an industry member, which means you're a travel association, or you're a PR person or something like that, you can belong to NACHA or TMAC. But otherwise,
so for yourself, it's all about contacts, networks.
It's very good. It's a very good networking organisation as well.
Good. So it appears that you have had an article recently for which you received an award. Could you mention what that is?
Yes, I had an article submitted by Ensemble Vacations to NACHA for their awards. They present awards every year to, they call them Travel Writers of Excellence. And,
of which you are.
Of which I was chosen
Travel
as
Writer
one.
of Excellence.
And I got an award for an article that I wrote about Papua New Guinea.
Okay.
So, and to me it's been one of the most wonderful places I've ever visited.
What would have drawn you to a place like Papua New Guinea?
Well, my husband and I were returning from Cooper Pedy, where we had been to write about the people who live in the under the ground there, because it's so hot, and they mine opals. It was a fascinating place. And we were on our way to visit friends on a sheep station near a place called Dubbo. And as I say, we were on the airport bus, and we sat next to a man who turned out to be a Supreme Court judge in Papua New Guinea. We became very friendly with him, and the next day we travelled for 6 hours with him on the train. He was going to almost the same place as we were. And we heard a lot more about Papua New Guinea. And I decided then and there that I wanted to visit it, because exotic destinations are one of my passions.
And where exactly in Papua did you go?
First of all, we started off with the Sepik River area. We went on a tour of the Sepik River on a houseboat. After that, we went to another place called Malagan, and from the Malagan, we went to another place which was called Lissenung Island. It's a dive resort, one of the finest dive resorts in the world. And we spent a couple of days there as well, whilst my companions went scuba snorkeling and stuff.
Now you mentioned, was it Malagan you mentioned?
I said
Or
Malagan.
does it sound Malagan?
It's called Malagan, I think, but
Okay,
the
but it
actual
sounds like Malagan, correct?
Malagan is to do with the masks that I'm going to talk about later.
Well, okay, we'll get into that in a second then. So Papua New Guinea is on the other side of the world. That's a long flight. How did you get there?
It took about 18 hours to get there. I broke my journey in Los Angeles for one night, so that made it a little bit easier to manage. And we changed planes in Brisbane and went on to Port Moresby, which is the main town in Papua New Guinea.
And what was Port Moresby like? Is that a place you would want to...
No.
No? Sounds like a nice place.
Yes.
What's wrong with Port Moresby?
Well, first of all, you've got to be very careful living in going to Port Moresby, because there's a lot of criminal activity that goes on there. But I guess it's a beautiful situation. It's right on the edge of the ocean, and we didn't spend a lot of time there, so I can't really say that there was anything too bad about Port Moresby.
So as a senior lady, as a travel writer as well, which is a unique combination. Is that a safe thing as a senior going to Port Moresby? by herself? Or?
Definitely not.
Okay.
Not for a senior lady or any single lady would I recommend them going, not just to Port Moresby, but to Papua New Guinea on their own. It's not advisable at all. And the thing is, the best way to go to Papua New Guinea is to go on a tour with a tour group. And I was with the tour group because it was all organized by Papua New Guinea PR in Los Angeles.
So you had a guide and
we had guides all the way through. And the thing is that there were 6 women. We were 6 women together on this trip. There were no, excepting our guide was a male. But it was a fantastic trip. It really was. And I'm still friendly with all of those women that I travelled with, and they were very high-powered women in the travel.
They're all travel writers.
They're all travel writers and
travel bloggers, travel tweeters.
Yes, tweeters in particular. There was one woman with us called Adventure Girl, and she is famous all over North America under the name Adventure Girl. Wherever we were, she would come out with her cell phone, and she would be using her cell phone to tell all her followers on Twitter where she was and what she was doing. She had over 1 million followers on Twitter. And one of the other women was a National Geographic explorer, very well-known travel writer as well. There was a National Geographic photographer with us, and another woman writes for the Dallas Morning News. She has a column.
So, National Geographic-wise, I have an artifact that I've got here from Papua New Guinea, and maybe you could talk about the Malagan and the Malagan's tongue. Which I guess fits in there like this.
Fits in there, yes.
So
right.
what is this thing?
Now this is what they call a Malagan mask, and they're made in different villages, but this particular one is worn by the male members of the tribe during the funerary and initiation ceremonies, and they've been used for hundreds of years. They still use them, they still wear them. They are carved. Can we have a look at this? They're actually beautifully carved and made. They're real works of art.
Now, so that would probably be...
And it's worn over the
Fabian.
Yes, a man by
New
the name
Ireland.
Yes, a man by the name of Fabian actually carved this, and I watched him carving it.
Oh,
this was on Lissenung Island, and he had come to Lissenung Island to sell his masks. And he was sitting there on the ground carving this mask, or a mask very similar, whilst I was there, and I said I wanted to buy one, so of course he was very pleased. And
you must have had a lot of cash. You say you don't make a lot of money as a travel writer, but is there not, do these things not sell for significant?
Yes, he sold this to me for 250 Papua New Guinea, the money that they have in Papua New Guinea. I can't remember at this moment what it would be in exchange into Canadian dollars, but it really wasn't all that much, I don't think. The National Geographic photographer that I travelled with, she took a photograph that was very popular in the National Geographic, I think it was in one of the National Geographic magazines, and it was of a man standing in the water next to Lissenung Island where we were, and he had on a grass skirt that was swirling all around him in the water, and she had a Malagan mask.
What is this
it's
stuff?
Like a fibre,
it's like a coconut fibre, yeah.
I think it's coconut fibre.
And the inside of this is like a lattice work of, I think it looks like bamboo, over which the fibre has been stretched.
Exactly. But what I want to tell you about these masks, there's a very famous mask maker in Papua New Guinea called Ben Sissia. There are a couple of them, and I think he's probably one of the top ones. And one of his masks sold at auction, I think it was in New York, for over $15,000.
Wow.
So you get a really good one, and it's worth a lot of money.
Nice.
And I think this is a very beautiful
So I'm going to retire wealthy then.
You're going to retire on the money you get from your Papua New Guinea mask.
So now you've taken some absolutely beautiful pictures, and I think we could probably, you know, have a look at your pictures here, and maybe you can explain a little bit about them.
This first picture here is of a Papua New Guinea man who's undergone initiation. Now, I'll read you an extract from the article that I wrote for the Ensemble Vacations, because it describes it very well.
Okay.
About the reason why he has these cut marks all down his back. So I'll start now. Along the river we were to see many Sepik people who had undergone scarification during an initiation rite, with the tribal belief that a prehistoric crocodile is a distant ancestor. This ritualistic skin cutting leaves a pattern similar to that of a crocodile's skin on a man's back, chest and buttocks. John Fearful, our captain aboard the Sepik Spirit, is one of the few white men ever to undergo this initiation. On a steamy night, as our boat rocked gently at its moorings, Fearful told us of his ordeal. I was to spend 1 month in a spirit house representative of a woman's womb. It was required that initiates remain celibate during that period. To spill our seed would be to lose our power, Fearful told us. After a month of sleep deprivation and numerous painful and frightening rituals, many of which we would not reveal because of sworn secrecy, Fearful explained, at dawn to the beat of Garavut drums, hundreds of incisions made with ultra-sharp blades were cut into my body. At this stage I was out of it, he said. Secret elements had taken place the night before. For days afterwards the incisions were opened, then packed with mud to cause infection, making the resultant scars more prominent. In Fearful's words, initiation was a serious commitment for me. I felt strongly about it, I still do, but the cutting and what followed made for the worst pain I have felt in my entire life. At one point the eldest thought I would bleed to death. We have a picture here of a Sepik River man with a pigeon and a yellow-crested parakeet. When we were sitting in our boat, because the whole place had been flooded before we got there, so we had to go everywhere in a boat. But we were sitting in this little village in our boat. He came across the water towards us, and there was a very dark sky, and it was beginning to thunder. And as a clap of thunder came, his little parakeet that was walking along the edge of his dugout went skittering along the edge of the dugout and jumped into his lap. And the pigeon fell like a stone to the bottom of the boat and just huddled down there. And he kept rowing towards us. And then he got out of the boat, and I went to have a chat with him, and we were talking, and he said to me, "You see this parakeet on my shoulder?" He said in his very broken English. He says, "He speaks to me, he calls me Papa." And I thought that was very lovely. Anyway, there were lots of things going on the Sepik River when we were there. There were many dugouts with children in them, and the Sepik River is actually known for its saltwater crocodiles, and they are the biggest crocodiles that you can get. But these children seem to be perfectly safe rowing around on their little dugouts. The women, they were fisherwomen, and they were all in traditional dress, and they were also fishing. But their method was quite different. This one woman that we were watching had a sort of cone-shaped wicker basket that she had pulled out of the water, and in it were all these tiny fish. And at the end of her dugout, one of her children was sitting, and they had a fire going, and a frying pan with sago pancakes cooking in this frying pan, and they were cooking their fish in there as well. And a lot of the fish that these women were catching were actually piranhas, not the kind that are so ferocious, but piranhas all the same. These women were beautifully dressed in their traditional dress with feathers, and their faces were all painted, and the one was smoking a cigarette that she actually grew her own tobacco, and she made these little roll-up cigarettes, and she was smoking away all the time, having a good time. Papua New Guinea, being a tropical island, has got the most beautiful flowers and vines and all sorts of things. It's very tropical. And when you fly over the jungle, you can go on for hours and not see any place at all to land, so it's quite scary at times when you think if anything did happen in this tiny plane we're in, there's nowhere to land. Another thing that's unusual about Papua New Guinea for people from the West is the fact that a lot of the men have their teeth stained red. And this is from chewing betel nut, which is a very common thing in India as well. And I did notice that when we were on the plane, they had these signs saying no chewing betel nut on the plane. You saw it in the airport and public buildings and all over the place. Because these men have got the terrible habit of just spitting the streams of betel nut out of their mouths wherever they are, leaving splashes that look like blood trailing down all the walls and all over the place. So anyway, it's quite an intimidating thing to see with these red teeth. When we went over to Papua New Guinea, each one of us took bags of toys and all sorts of things for the village people. But we were told very seriously that we were not to sneak any gifts to any of them. We had to give all of the gifts to the woman who was actually, to the guide who was taking us around, and he would give them to the chief of the village. There had been very serious problems in the past where if certain people didn't get a gift, some people got one and other people didn't get one, a riot would start in the village. And so we were very careful about that. We took all sorts of small things for the children, and they absolutely loved them. And one of the things I thought was very entertaining as we went along the Sepik River, when we would come close to a village, the jet boat that we were on had to slow down because, well, just for good manners really, so that you didn't go and upset any of their dugouts or anything like that. But the children would all go scrambling right up into the tops of these trees along the edge of the river near the village. And as we came along, they would all be screaming and waving their hands and jumping out of these trees into the river. And we'd stand up and cheer and clap our hands, and they were so excited they'd all go running back and climbing up the trees again. In the end we had all the adult men all climbing up the trees as well and all jumping into the water.
And no sign of the insect tribe?
No, didn't see any insect tribe. The only insects we saw were mosquitoes, like you wouldn't.
Oh, there's a great TV show that I really enjoyed where the insect tribe came to England and experienced our ways and shared some of the wisdom of Papua New Guinea with the Cockneys.
Yes, I remember you told me about that.
Yeah.
We didn't see them, unfortunately.
So your next trip is to New Orleans to look at the voodoo situation and
Exactly.
hopefully not get scammed.
And go to the swamp.
The swamp and the cemeteries. So we look forward to hearing about that next.